Mindfulness, How to Stay Sane in an Insane World by Helen Nicholson. This book is a dedication to Michael, my precious soulmate, Sabrina and Caitlin, my amazing daughters, whom I'm so incredibly proud of, the networking company team, Caitlin, Paula, Portia, Noku, Angie, KG, and Sheena, for doing such great fairy dust work so that I could do the deep work required to birth this book. And Brookdale, my favorite recovery place in the whole world. Chapter 1, Wake-Up Calls. Mommy, I don't believe in the tooth fairy anymore. With tears in her eyes, her lip quivering, my 8-year-old twin daughter was the picture of disappointment and sorrow. The source of her misery was not only that some mystical creature, aka the tooth fairy, had failed to exchange her recently fallen out tooth for a 5 Rand coin for 4 nights in a row, but that I, as her mother, was somehow responsible for a great betrayal. I was too involved in my work to fully pay attention to the rites of passage that my girls were going through. I'd let my twin daughters down horribly, and it shook me to my core. Most people who practice mindfulness have had some kind of a wake up and smell the coffee kind of call. Perhaps a health scare, a near miss in the traffic, or a personal tragedy that literally brings them back to complete focus and reality. Arianna Huffington, author of Thrive, founder of the Huffington Post, and one of Time magazine's most influential people in the world, knocked her head on a table and fell to the ground. Lying in a pool of blood in her home office with a cracked cheekbone, she realized she had to revisit the quality of her life. She was working 18-hour days, was completely sleep-deprived, and lying on the floor injured, thinking, is this what success looks like? I had to have not one, but 2 mindfulness reality wake-up calls. I'm clearly quite stubborn. One was the parenting wake-up call with the tooth fairy I mentioned previously, and the other was a brush with death health scare. I was a single mother of identical twin girls, Sabrina and Caitlin, from when they were 3. These were not easy years. I felt mostly humbled, and the other word that best characterized my life was overwhelmed. I felt overwhelmed every single day. In fact, I was so overwhelmed, I bought the book called Overwhelmed by Bridget Schultz twice, not even registering that I already had it, although the covers did look different in my defense. I never got to the end of my to-do list. I was tired all the time and was largely living an unconscious life. I realized that I wasn't just missing out on the tooth fairy. I was missing out on my children's childhoods and life in general. It felt like every week it was Monday, then it was Friday. Suddenly we were in October, and I thought, how did we get to be in October? I looked at my little girls who were 8 and thought, I haven't been fully present in their childhood. I was putting on weight, and yet I hardly ate during the day, while at night I would be so starving that I ate all the contents of the fridge. I woke up tired and felt like a hamster on a treadmill, always rushing and constantly busy. My standard reply to "How are you?" was hectic, so hectic. I wasn't exercising at all, as I felt there was just not enough time in the day. I felt like I was a character in a black and white movie. I was going through the motions, but it wasn't a conscious, high quality, or happy life. After the tooth fairy incident, I felt that there had to be a better way to live and started reading and researching options. I eventually hopped on a plane and attended a leadership program in Orlando, Florida, in the USA, called the Corporate Athlete. This was a life-changing course for me, as the focus was on the link between one's physical, emotional, and mental states. In the corporate world, we live largely in our heads, dragging our body along behind our brains. These quadrants together, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, combine to achieve peak performance. The program also emphasized the power of strategic recovery. More about that in Chapter 2, which was a true epiphany for me. We are not designed to be on all the time. After attending the Corporate Athlete program, I began to actively practice gratitude, and I started to run. I started off with baby steps, but 15 years later, I still practice both religiously. Both gratitude and running have been life-changing for me. While the Corporate Athlete program helped me with my physical well-being, there was still a lot of work to be done around stress and recovery and the emotional and spiritual dimensions of my life. My health scare. A few years later, my family, parents, sister, brother, children, and my husband, I had since remarried, went to the Drakensberg Mountains for the Easter weekend. I'd been sick with flu for weeks, and I'm asthmatic, so it inevitably goes into my chest, and the recovery period is always long. I was so impatient not being able to breathe, and had been on 3 different antibiotics with very little result. We decided to go for an early morning hike on the Saturday morning. I had some tea when I woke up and thought that if I combined my antibiotic with an old bronchial dilator medicine, I would get better faster. The two were not meant to be taken together, and I went into anaphylactic shock. I remember collapsing and being supported by my husband as I couldn't walk back to my room and ripping off my clothes to get into the shower, desperate to get cool. I didn't get to the shower. I passed out on the bathroom tiles where my family found me, naked and unconscious. We were 50 kilometers away from the nearest town, so my family bundled me into the car in my unconscious state and drove quickly through the twisty mountain roads. They managed to find a doctor who gave me injections of adrenaline, cortisone, and antihistamine, and I gradually stabilized. I then had to deal with my very traumatized family, who said that witnessing my close demise was very upsetting. They felt that I wasn't looking after myself well enough and were worried about where the self-neglect would end. The doctor had looked at me very sternly in his office and said, "Young lady, I hope you realize that you very nearly died today." My family and the doctor were right. My cavalier self-medication strategy had gotten me into real trouble. It was a sobering moment, and it took me a long time to share this story with my friends. I only started sharing it in our workshops and presentations in 2020, as it felt like I had to process this event and really sit with why this had happened. Why did I give so little regard and attention to myself, especially when my body was giving me clear signals that it wasn't happy? I started working with an executive coach, went back to Pilates, started regular meditation and yoga, booked a massage religiously every 2 weeks, and instituted a 1-day Sabbath over the weekend. I also had to confront my self-limiting beliefs around recovery. This book reflects and documents the account of my mindfulness journey. I hope you find the lessons as helpful and useful as I have. I do live a different life now. I moved from the black and white movie to a much more conscious and intentional HD Technicolor life. If you've ever upgraded your TV, you'll know what I'm talking about. The sound and picture all become amplified. That's what living a conscious, intentional life does to you. I'm eternally grateful for the blessings I have. I notice things like the weather, tastes, smells, and pay attention to my feelings much more intentionally. Of course, I fall off the wagon, as we all do occasionally. During COVID, with the rising levels of anxiety, I've had to double up on some of these rituals. Without them, I would have been lost. This book is like a recipe full of relatively small, yet incredibly powerful ingredients that go into living a mindful, juicy life. Chapter 2. Intentional Strategic Recovery. Taking regular time out to recover has been one of my hard-won lessons. I previously always associated recovery with laziness. I had to shine a light on my limiting belief and have the epiphany that recovery is actually the secret to high performance. Stress is actually not the bad guy. Our adrenaline serves us when we need to fight or flee. Absence of recovery is the real bad guy. The biggest problem in business is that adrenaline is coursing through our body the whole day. There is no respite. And as human beings, we are not designed to be on all the time. Our bodies are naturally oscillatory entities, and nature supports us in this oscillation through rhythmic cycles, night and day, spring and autumn, and winter and summer. The Harvard Business Review studied the famous tennis player Ivan Lendl, who was the world champion 4 years in a row in the 1980s. Harvard Business Review watched thousands of hours of footage to see if they could uncover the secret source of Lendl's sustained high performance. They noticed that he took 5 to 10 seconds longer between shots than his competitor on the other side of the net. His adrenaline and stress levels would increase automatically as he served or returned a shot. but between shots, he had a longer recovery period than his rival. During this recovery period, he would play with his racket strings or hit his racket against his foot for 5 to 10 seconds. Lendl took a longer recovery time between shots unconsciously. He didn't even know that he had a longer recovery period than other tennis players until the team at Harvard Business Review pointed it out. His ability to oscillate his energy so dramatically during a game was his secret sauce for his sustained high performance. When Harvard Business Review pointed this out, he even extended his recovery period by a few more seconds and carried on his winning streak. As business people, we can learn profound performance levels from the sporting world, which in many ways is the ultimate laboratory for studying high performance. All sports people have recovery built into their training schedules. I saw an interesting example of this when we first ran our leadership training program at the High Performance Centre in Pretoria, where South African athletes train and prepare to compete internationally. We were watching the swimming relay team train, and I have to confess, it was a very pleasant eye-candy experience. Many hours were spent on this, all in the name of research. When the swimmers were finished a training session in the heat pool, they go down to the training pool to do 10 to 20 lengths slowly, where they recover and bring down their heart rates. If they didn't do this, their next swimming training session would be compromised and their performance would suffer. I'd like to see your boss's face if you said that you need a recovery period between October and December as you think you need an off-season. You're lucky if you get 21 days leave in a year. Recovery is not something that is recognized or appreciated in the business world. Yet in many ways, we are the ultimate corporate athletes, as our demands are even more intense than professional athletes. We are also expected to perform the whole year round with very few off-seasons. And our decisions have a more profound impact as they affect many people's economic well-being. The pressure is extremely high, so we need to approach and prioritize recovery as an essential part of our resilience toolkit, just as athletes do. The quality of your recovery determines the quality of your performance. I believe we are still holding on to outdated paradigms where we associate holidays with recovery. We need to get more creative and intentional with our recovery. I love words and writing, so I'd like you to imagine recovery as a yearbook. Your days are sentences, your weeks are paragraphs, your months are chapters, and your year is a book. Daily recovery rituals. If your day is a sentence, what is your full stop at the end of your day? Your full stop is an activity that signals you've stopped working for the day. Just as meetings have hard stops when you have to jump onto another meeting, what is your hard stop at the end of your day? I've realized many people don't even have commas in place to mark the end of their workday. They just keep going and wonder when they're still working on their laptops in bed why they're finding it so hard to sleep. I'm going to share my daily full stop recovery rituals with you in the hope that it will give you some new ideas or amplify your own. I have 2 full stops to mark the end of my day. The first is when I bath and change into my pajamas. Yes, I'm that girl in my pajamas at 6 p.m. And the second is when I sit down on the couch with my husband and we have a whiskey. We don't have our phones with us, and it's our time to sit and catch up. My girls, if they are home, join us. Michael makes delicious snacks, and the whole family comes together for at least an hour. I am then done for the day, and I don't open my laptop again until the morning. I've also deleted email off my phone, so I only check my mail twice a day. I have never been so productive. I wish I'd done this years ago. If something is that urgent, the person will call. I realized that in order to do this, I needed to redefine what a crisis is. When my daughters were younger and were screaming or crying, I would ask them, "Is there blood?" If there's no blood, we're good. I take a similar approach with my team. I've observed many people get into the habit of thinking all problems are crises. They are not. When we are calm and mindfully conscious as leaders and team members, then serenity and energy. Let me just do that again. When we are calm and mindfully conscious as leaders and team members, then serenity and energy cascades into everyone we come into contact with. This is more important during these challenging times than it's ever been before. Your energy is contagious. Weekly recovery rituals. Imagine your week as a paragraph in your recovery yearbook. What is your recovery ritual over the weekend? I would strongly suggest that you declare either Saturday or Sunday a Sabbath, which is dedicated to your stress and recovery. It has no religious connotations, but we can take powerful lessons from the religions which do advocate Sabbaths. I attended a presentation by Adrian Gore, CEO and founder of Discovery, and asked him how he managed his energy and resilience. He responded saying he turns his phone off on a Friday night and switches it back on Saturday night. He's a religious Jewish man, so he practices a Sabbath as part of his faith. He said that after his digital Sabbath, he can feel the power start to flood back into his body on Saturday evening, as if he's powered up his laptop after it's been on charge all night. Ideally, your Sabbath should include a digital detox where you switch off your devices. We are so connected, especially to our phones, that even leaving our phone in a drawer for 30 minutes feels like someone has cut off a limb. Our devices don't support recovery, as every ping on our phone creates an adrenaline spike. Start small by leaving your phone in another room or in your car for an hour until you've built up some digital detox time. The more you intentionally disconnect, the more you'll enjoy it. In Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism, he has researched the rise of anxiety and loneliness in young people. The graphs of the increase in cell phone adoption and the rise of anxiety mirror each other perfectly. Social media is designed to hook you. When young people started to use cell phones, they became more anxious and lonely, and in many instances felt more inadequate. Our brains are not designed to be boiled on a pressure cooker all the time. When we are constantly connected to our phones, our brains are on all the time. Our brains need time to rest. They need to daydream and have time and space to just wander. That is why we often have our best ideas when we're not sitting in front of a screen. Archimedes had his eureka moment when he was sitting in the bath. Einstein had his aha moment about the theory of relativity while he was cycling on his bike. My 2 recovery rituals on a weekend begin with one on a Friday night, where we prefer to stay at home and very seldom go out. My husband makes a braai or barbecue. He buys me my favorite magazine, and I eat knickknacks, my favorite snack, and we have a whiskey. My body knows and embraces the routine of this ritual, and I can feel myself starting to unwind at the beginning of the weekend. My second ritual happens on a Saturday morning when I go for a run with my friends and we all have coffee afterwards. When I get home, I leave my phone in a drawer in my room and I lie horizontal for at least 3 to 4 hours. I either watch a series on Netflix or I read a book. If you have small children, then I know this is challenging. This is when you need to enlist a babysitter. You need to have at least 90 minutes to yourself over a weekend. Your rebooting is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Imagine your month as a chapter of your yearbook. Do you have a positive activity that marks the end of one month and the start of the next month? Often, the only way we know one month is transitioning to the next is through debit orders going through our accounts. This isn't a very positive or joyful ritual. I've had a long-standing belief that when the going gets tough, the tough go to spas, and this has served me well. I book either a facial or a massage once a month on either the first or last Friday of every month. I do this in January and book these out for the year. I've often had to move these appointments, but it's been amazing how organized I feel taking charge of my recovery instead of feeling like a victim of my calendar. I often observe that people wait to feel absolutely exhausted before they book a break or spa treatment. Intentional strategic recovery is about preventing you from getting to that point. In fact, as I'm writing this, I'm sitting at the Brookdale Health Hydro, my favorite spa in the world, in the middle of the forest. I've come here once a year every year since my girls were 5 years old. It was one of my survival strategies to deal with single motherhood of twins. Everyone needs their equivalent of a Brookdale. Some ideas from delegates have included booking a regular monthly outing with friends. When one get-together takes place, schedule the next one before you leave. You could also book a hike, as the more you get into nature, the more powerful your recovery will be. If you don't diarize and prioritize recovery, you may suddenly find that the year is almost over, and you're too exhausted to even think intentionally about recovery. One of the things I've noticed is that as we get busier, the two things that drop out of your schedules first are exercise and time with friends. It's exactly at these times that we need both even more. And if you exercise with a friend, you can kill two birds with one stone. When we're with people who add value and fill our souls with joy, our brain releases oxytocin, which is a feel-good hormone. Exercise causes the release of serotonin and dopamine. These lift our moods, and the more socially connected you are to the right people, not people who drain or irritate you, the happier and healthier you'll be. All the longevity research emphasizes this. Older people who keep busy and see friends regularly live longer and enjoy their life more. Yearly recovery rituals. The last part of our writing metaphor is to think of your year as a book. The traditional work paradigm is taking one annual vacation in a year. That simply isn't enough rest and recovery time to sustain the kind of performance that's needed in these volatile, uncertain times. I've greatly admired a colleague of mine who buys a big year planner that comes out in the supermarkets in September. He then makes note of all the public or bank holidays for the following year and plans 3-day breaks around these dates and marks them off on the calendar. He even tries to book and pay for as many breaks as possible before the end of October. He does this as he knows it almost guarantees making his recovery a priority. He often goes camping with his family, so these are inexpensive breaks in nature. 3 days is the magic number for a recovery break. 1 or 2 is too short. Imagine starting a new year with all your recovery breaks already in your diary and your work schedule works around those dates, and not the other way around. Why recovery needs to be active rather than passive. Take in a deep breath and hold it. Keep holding. How long can you inhale until it gets uncomfortable? 30 seconds? 1 minute? It doesn't take long until you need to exhale. Think of your work ethic as the inhale, as essential to your career as oxygen is to your body. With a good work ethic, we make, execute, coordinate, manage, fulfill, and get things done. To-do list, inhale. Making that list come to life, inhale. We can't keep inhaling forever. Eventually, we have to exhale. This exhale is your rest ethic, and it's just as essential. A solid rest ethic gifts us inspiration, ideas, and recovery. It allows us to build up our enthusiasm and sustain our passion and gain a fresh perspective. Exhale. Having an aha moment on something you're battling with. Exhale. Just as a deep exhale prepares you for a better inhale, your rest ethic enables you to have a better work ethic. This has been a key component in my journey to rest and recovery. Discovering that rest is not only passively sitting on the couch watching Netflix. Rest is not simply free time and lounging around. It's a skill that needs to be learned. It's something that, just like a meeting or a presentation at work, needs to be scheduled and protected. And not all rest is created equal. We need to aspire to the concept of noble leisure. According to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, rest is not just relaxation. Relaxation, he warned, is often not just something we do in order to recover from more work. True rest, or what Aristotle called noble leisure, is the highest form of rest. It's active and not passive. If you spend a whole weekend watching Netflix, you won't feel rested. You'll feel a bit like a zombie. Active rest is getting fully engaged in a passion project, such as a hobby or something that fills your life with meaning. I love cooking an elaborate meal for my family or baking on weekends. These kinds of activities may take us into a state of flow. The first step in noble leisure is to step away from the guilt about not working. If you struggle with this, remind yourself that we need rest and that it's one of the best ways to stay productive and creative. You can't inhale deeply if you never exhale properly. The second step in noble leisure is to check in with yourself. And the best way to do this is through journaling. Often we don't even realize how busy and anxious we are until we take some time to reflect. Reflection needs to be balanced with plenty of play. Playfulness not only makes us happy, it's also the key to flow and creativity. This can take many forms, from actually playing games to playing an instrument or getting creative in the kitchen. During play, we embrace a what-if mindset rather than a what-is mindset. With all the challenges that COVID has presented, play is more important than ever. I've always struggled with play, as I'm an in-your-head kind of girl, tended to dismiss play as silly and not something I have time for. When I realized that play is an essential part of active rest, I adopted 2 play rituals, and I now realize how much I needed them. The first ritual is that my husband and I signed up for dance lessons. We both have 2 left feet, but are committed nevertheless. It has become a weekly ritual where we laugh and we have fun. It also brought us closer together. The second ritual is a bi-weekly games night after supper. We used to only play 30 seconds in Pictionary as a family. I went on the hunt for new creative games, and we've had a ball playing new and challenging board games. The girls' friends often come too, and we laugh a lot. What active play ritual can you adopt? Travel is closely related to play. While we haven't been able to travel much during COVID, you can become a traveler in your own neighborhood. Go on a tour, take the red bus tour in your city, or explore a new area you've never been to before. Laser inventor Charles H. Towns remarked that there are always unturned stones along well-trod paths. Discovery awaits those who spot and take the trouble to turn these stones. I love walking, and I find I always notice new things when walking, more so than when I'm driving. Designing and embracing our rest ethic allows us to spot those unturned stones and take the time to turn them, finding the creative discoveries and little joys hidden in plain sight that others are far too busy to notice. Whatever you end up doing as your daily full stop, your weekly Sabbath, or your monthly or yearly recovery ritual, I trust it fills your life with meaning and leaves you full of energy and inspiration to tackle the things you truly care about. Put the same amount of energy and intention into your time off as you do into your time on. It's a game changer. Does your recovery story hold you back? When I attended the corporate athlete program in the States, they facilitated a very powerful storytelling session. The premise was that behind every behavior, we have an underlying story that we tell ourselves. These stories are either positive or negative. For example, Tiger Woods really battled hitting balls out of bunkers when he was young. His father knew this and worked with him to change his story around bunkers. The new story saw him embracing the challenge of a bunker until eventually his bunker shots became part of his winning strategy. In writing my old story in a storytelling exercise, which is designed to uncover your limited beliefs and behaviors that may be holding you back, I realized that although I bought into the concept of recovery intellectually, my emotional story kept on sabotaging my recovery behavior. I associated recovery with laziness. When I lay on the couch, even though my body embraced the rest, the internal voice in my head was saying that I was lazy and I should always keep busy. It's often a maternal voice, either a mother, grandmother, or aunt's voice, that rings in our ears from our childhood, saying things like, "Don't be lazy," or "It's time to do your chores." We need to hear that voice, acknowledge it, and then ignore it completely. That voice doesn't serve us, and it also hasn't kept up with the latest science around performance. The old world of work celebrated the paradigm of the marathon runner. We celebrated stamina above all else. Working the longest hours and surviving on minimal sleep became badges of honor we wore with pride. This is a very old-fashioned paradigm. We need to embrace the concept of being an athlete, where we rest and recover religiously, every day, every week, every month, and every year. Then we will truly unleash our potency and peak performance. I see so many delegates and people on the quest for higher performance, and when I ask them how they've increased their recovery rituals, they look at me blankly. Until we buy into the concept that the quality of our performance will always be determined by the quality of our recovery, we are destined to repeat cycles of overwork and burnout. Acknowledge your recovery story, especially around laziness or having to be constantly busy. Write it down, burn it if you must, and realize that sustainable peak performance comes from the equation high performance equals high recovery. Chapter 3. The neuroscience behind mindfulness, movement, and sleep. Our brain is a complex organ. Up until 20 years ago, neurosurgeons believed that most of our brain's development happened as a child between birth and 7 years of age. That's why we play Mozart to babies in utero, and why there's a strong focus on early childhood development by both parents and teachers, as we believe we are laying foundations for future intelligent and resilient adults. When neurosurgeons realized that brains are capable of making new connections even in adulthood, the science of neuroplasticity was born. Your brain is not a static organ. Neuroplasticity allows your brain to adapt and challenge, which promotes the brain's ability to learn new things and to enhance people's thinking. Imagine your arm as a brain cell and your fingers as the dendrites of your brain cell. When you are thinking or solving a problem, your dendrites are trying to connect and find other dendrites to help solve the problem. If they connect as a result of neuroplasticity, then you experience an aha moment. You gain an insight to solve your issue or remember what you've forgotten. In a perfect world, that process happens seamlessly. You solve your problems first time with the best solution, and you never forget where you parked your car in a shopping center or why you walked into a room. Sadly, real life interferes. We get busy and our brains get full. Our dendrites don't find the connecting dendrites or synapses the way they're supposed to. The impact of neuroplasticity. In a very exciting neuroscience development, sleep, movement, and mindfulness have been identified as the biggest lifestyle factors influencing neuroplasticity. These are not external environmental factors and are all within our own control. We control how much we sleep, unless we have a small baby, but that doesn't last forever. We are responsible for how much we move or exercise. Interestingly, it only takes 30 minutes of brisk walking per week to get your brain firing from a neuroplasticity perspective. We also control how practically mindful we are in our daily lives. Are you fully present, and do you listen intently to other people in conversations? Do you have a meditation or breathing ritual? Do you practice gratitude? These are not external factors. We are in the driving seat of our brain function. We think better when we get proper sleep, when we move, and when we are mindful. Instinctively, we all know this. But now the business case for sleep, movement, and mindfulness have become even more compelling. Tech companies such as Apple, Microsoft, Google, LinkedIn, and Facebook are running these training programs for their staff. These companies have a vested interest in their people thinking better and being more resilient. Avoiding amygdala hijacks. You'll have heard about a fight or flight response in your brain when you're faced with a perceived threat. The amygdala is a collection of cells near the base of the brain where emotions are given meaning, remembered, and attached to associations and responses to them, emotional memories. The amygdala is part of the brain's limbic system and is key to how people process strong emotions like fear and pleasure. When we feel threatened and afraid, the amygdala automatically activates the fight or flight response by sending out signals to release stress hormones that prepare our body to fight or run away. This response is triggered by emotions like fear, anxiety, aggression, and anger. Why your prefrontal cortex is boss. The frontal lobes are the two largest areas at the front of your brain. They're part of the prefrontal cortex, which is where thinking, reasoning, decision-making, and planning happens. These frontal lobes allow you to process and think about your emotions. You can then manage these emotions and determine a logical response. Unlike the automatic response of the amygdala, the response to fear from your frontal lobes is controlled by you. Psychologist and writer Daniel Goleman uses the term amygdala hijack in his earlier emotional intelligence work. This happens when a situation causes your amygdala to hijack control of your response to stress. The amygdala disables the frontal lobes and activates the fight or flight response. Without the frontal lobes, you can't think clearly, make rational decisions, or control your responses. Control has been hijacked by the amygdala. You can improve your frontal lobe response through mindfulness techniques. They serve to calm your brain, avoid an amygdala hijack, and consciously engage your frontal lobes by thinking about the situation and finding a thoughtful, rational situation. When MRI brain scans were done on Buddhist monks who'd been meditating regularly for 20 years, they found that there were more connectors in the prefrontal cortex of their brains than non-meditators. The more connections in people's prefrontal cortexes, the more advanced their thinking is. My personal experience. We invited the Harvard happiness professor, Tal Ben-Shahar, to visit South Africa 10 years ago. I'll never forget the metaphor he used. He said that life is like a big, complicated jigsaw puzzle. If you had to complete a 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, the first pieces you'd find would be the corner pieces. The corner pieces represent the things that we can control: exercise, meditation, and gratitude. I would like to add the fourth corner, which I believe is sleep. More about that later. He believed that life is like the middle of a jigsaw puzzle, which is more complex and where we have less control over these factors. If you can include the 4 corner habits into your daily life, you can literally hold the more uncontrollable elements of your life. I love this analogy. Chapter 4, you need to move it, move it. My personal experience around the benefits of movement. A few years ago, my year began with huge challenges. My mom went into hospital for a routine medical procedure that went wrong, and she ended up on a ventilator in ICU for a month. My helper at home had a health issue, we were undergoing renovations, and our dachshund Alfie had emergency back surgery. It was a very difficult time. I had to draw on Tal Ben-Shahar's jigsaw puzzle analogy I mentioned earlier, and realized that these stressful life events were the middle pieces of my life jigsaw puzzle that I had no control over. What I did have control over were my corner pieces: exercise, sleep, meditation, and gratitude. I ran every day as if my life depended on it. My exercise corner puzzle piece kept me sane. Why exercise is a keystone habit. All habits are not created equal. Some habits are more powerful than others. Exercise is what is termed a keystone habit. Charles Duhigg, the author of The Power of Habit, describes a keystone habit as a habit that people introduce into their routines that unintentionally carry over into other aspects of their lives. Keystone habits cause a chain reaction. Landmark studies have shown that exercise facilitates the desire to make a variety of other positive changes, like eating better, being more productive, smoking less, spending less, and feeling less stressed. The neuroscience of movement. What does research tell us about the relationship between movement and the brain? Prior to 1995, researchers believed that the health benefits of exercise were limited to the body. Recent research has shown that regular physical activity and movement benefit more than just the body. They actually improve brain function. Movement supplies brain cells with oxygen, promotes the production of new brain cells, and aids in creating new connections and synapses. Experiments at the University of Illinois revealed rats that exercised had a greater number of neuron connections than non-exercising rats. Movement also increases energy, reduces stress, and calms the mind and body. Research shows that exercise also stimulates the production of brain chemicals, norepinephrine and dopamine, which energizes and enhances mood. Other research studies reveal that exercise improves classroom behavior, academic performance, and social skills. Many schools now understand that students learn better, behave better, and are socially more successful when they have physical activity and movement breaks throughout the day. One of the biggest challenges during COVID is that children have not been able to run outside and play. My colleague has a 10-year-old daughter who had to stay at home during COVID, as most children did, and make the shift to online learning. The child started getting terrible migraines and debilitating headaches. The doctor said this was one of the consequences of COVID, as children weren't moving enough and so were internalizing their anxiety and becoming anxious and worried. Movement is a way of getting out of our heads, into our bodies, and processing our thoughts. How to build exercise into your busy day. In 2002, researchers at the New Mexico State University wanted to understand why some people were able to build the habit of exercise into their days, no matter how busy they got, and others weren't able to embed the exercise habit. They studied 266 people, most of whom worked out at least 3 times a week. What they found was that many of them started running or lifting weights on a whim, or because they suddenly had free time or wanted to deal with unexpected stresses in their lives. However, the reason they continued, why it became a habit, was because of a unique relationship between a cue and reward. In one group, 92% of people said they habitually exercised because it made them feel good. They grew to expect and crave the endorphins and other neurochemicals a workout provided. In another group, 67% of people said that working out gave them a sense of accomplishment. They'd come to crave a regular sense of triumph from tracking their performance, and that self-reward was enough to make the physical activity into a habit. As their rewards became more entrenched, the habit was much more likely to stick. I learned the power of a simple cue to get me exercising regularly when I attended the corporate athlete program in the States 12 years ago. The facilitator recommended placing my running shoes at the bottom of my bed every night before I went to bed. This was my cue. I was telling my brain the night before that I had a date with those running shoes the next day to pound the pavement. To this day, I run 3 or 4 times a week and still lay out my running shoes and my whole outfit the night before. I had the cue down pat, but what was my reward going to be? Other than the elusive running high, which I've experienced occasionally, I realized my favorite thing about running is catching up with my best friend over a run and having a cappuccino afterwards. So that's my reward. I've realized that having that cue and focusing on the reward makes the behavior more automatic. I don't have to think about it too much. That's helpful when I don't feel like it or it's cold and dark. I've realized that good habits prevent you from being pulled around by your emotional state. You just do it. Chapter 5. Sleep your way to the top. You can survive without food longer than you can survive without sleep. If someone wanted to torture you, the first thing they would do is subject you to sleep deprivation. After 3 days, you'd confess to almost anything. Sleep-deprived business people were largely symbolic of the excessive, greedy, super-aggressive way of doing business, represented in movies like Wolf of Wall Street and Boiler Room in the 80s and 90s. In the past, people wore their sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. "I'll sleep when I'm dead" was a popular refrain. It's only recently that the life-changing capacity of sleep has been truly valued and appreciated. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon and the richest man in the world, sleeps for 8 hours a night. He does that because he knows he's more strategic, makes better decisions, solves problems better, and is generally a much nicer person when he sleeps for 8 hours. We all need to be like him. Are you sleeping well? When I ask that, I mean, do you sleep for at least 7 to 8 hours a night without waking up? Do you wake up naturally without an alarm clock? Do you wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep? If you answered yes to the 2 first questions and no to the third, you're sleeping well and can skip to the next chapter. For the rest of you, keep going because having a good night's sleep is an essential part of your mindfulness toolkit. There's practically no element of our lives that's not improved by getting a good night's sleep. And conversely, there's no element of life that's not diminished by a lack of sleep. This includes world leaders and politicians who have to make very important, far-reaching decisions that impact millions of people's lives. Donald Trump famously said he slept for only 3 hours a night. Bill Clinton, who used to only get 5 hours of sleep a night, admitted that every important mistake I've ever made in my life, I've made because I was too tired. And I think we all know at least one decision he may have been referring to. One of our training delegates on our leadership program, a senior partner at an auditing firm, told me she does a full day's work and then after having dinner with her family, she goes to bed. She sets her alarm for midnight and works again until 3 a.m., after which she goes to bed until 6 a.m. I questioned how sustainable this is. For someone so intelligent, this is a very unintelligent way to work. because she is interrupting her natural sleep cycle and will eventually land up with a serious health issue. Before we can sleep better, we need to understand the biology of sleep better. In his excellent book, How to Sleep, Dr. Rafael Palaio demonstrates that there's a lot going on in our bodies while we're sleeping. Scientific studies of the sleeping brain reveal not only how the human body functions during sleep, but also how our sleep affects us while we're awake. Making the most of our sleep cycles. Long ago, sleep was considered a passive, almost death-like state. But through modern sleep science, we now know that sleep is an active process. The brain is not turned off, but instead goes through predictable cycles of various sleep patterns known as sleep stages. The modern era of sleep science was born in the 1950s, when scientists began combining measurement of brain waves with other electrical signals from the body. To help make sense of the measurement, scientists divided sleep into two distinct modes: rapid eye movement, REM sleep, and non-rapid eye movement, NREM sleep. Since 75 to 80% of our sleep is NREM, non-REM sleep, scientists further divided it into three stages that correspond to light, N1, intermediate, N2, and deep sleep, N3. Many significant things occur during this non-REM sleep period, including the physical growth of our bodies and memory consolidation. NREM sleep is even thought to have a key function in the restoration of our brains by resetting our brain synapses. In REM, we have our deepest sleep. In the N1 light sleep of NREM sleep, we transition from the awake state into sleep. We become much less aware of the outside world as we turn inward. Our eyes close and start to slowly roll back in our heads. In this drowsy state, we may think we're still awake, but anyone watching us can see we are checking out. I see my husband regularly do this while we're watching TV. He starts to doze, although he always assures me he is awake. In the N2 intermediate sleep, which takes up about half of our total sleep time, we have bursts of unique brainwave patterns called sleep spindles. These play an important role in the brain, forming memories of new information and facts that we learned, and events that can be consciously recalled. This is the stage that is most affected in Alzheimer's and dementia patients. During this stage, we catalog, link our memories, and make sense of the day. N3 is our deepest sleep period. Dominating the first third of the night, N3 takes up 10% or less of total adult sleep time. Children and teenagers will often have more. In this N3 period, our breathing and heart rate reach their lowest point. This is the period when it's the most difficult to wake us up. It is also when our brains secrete the most growth hormones. REM is the sleep stage most closely associated with dreaming and dominates the last third of the night. Looking solely at brainwaves, it's difficult to distinguish REM sleep from being awake with our eyes open. Although most of our other muscles stop moving, our eye movements dramatically change as we transition from NREM to REM, with wild, seemingly chaotic movements. Our heart rate also fluctuates greatly. If you lead a sedentary lifestyle, REM may be when you reach your peak heart rate on a given day. REM episodes tend to become longer in later sleep cycles, and at the end of the REM stage, we usually change our sleeping position and we briefly wake up. Each complete sleep cycle, which can include all of the NREM and REM stages, lasts about 90 minutes, although individual cycles vary throughout the night. As illustrated, we sleep most deeply in the early cycles, and REM is longer and more intense in the later cycles. The first sleep cycle is dominated by a deep, slow-wave sleep and contains mostly NREM sleep. As the night goes on, this mixture changes, so that by the early morning hours, we have very little of that deep sleep and REM sleep prevails. That's why we have our longest and most intense dreams just before we wake up to start our day. Our brains are very clever and can self-correct if, for example, we wake up too early and cut off some of our REM time. When we do get a chance to sleep again, we will have more REM sleep than usual. Each of us wakes up about every 90 minutes in our sleep cycle. We toss, stir, change position, sometimes even open our eyes and scan the room. It's a phenomenon so brief, lasting less than a minute, that in most instances, we don't remember doing it. Waking up during the night is normal, but having trouble going back to sleep is not. More than any specific sleep stage, what matters most for refreshing sleep is the healthy continuity of the sleep cycles. Think of the natural mixture of sleep stages as your car's gear transmission. The normal progression of shifting gears, moving from one sleep stage to the next, allows you to efficiently obtain a smooth ride, a good night's sleep. If your gears are slipping, consciously starting and stopping your sleep, or you're stuck in first gear, N1 sleep, you will have an inefficient, bumpy ride, and you won't get the good sleep you need. Essentially, you're going through your day feeling like a zombie because your gears have not taken you smoothly from first to fourth gears during the night. Insomnia is a thinker's condition. Consider a typical busy day. If you accomplished 8 out of the 10 things on that day's to-do list, you had a really good day. As soon as you hit your pillow, the 2 things you failed to do float to the top of your brain. You want to sleep, but also don't want to forget your to-do list, and your mind can't stop racing. So many delegates complain of this inability to turn off their brains. One of the biggest reasons for this is that most people are never alone with their thoughts until they hop into bed, when the day's distractions fall away. It's often our only truly alone time. The best technique to turn off your brain so you can get a good night's sleep is to reserve 15 to 30 minutes every night after all your work and activities are finished. Sit in a quiet place with a paper notebook, not a laptop or phone, and write down what you need to accomplish tomorrow. Write down mundane tasks such as chores. Then list those things you've been meaning to do but haven't gotten around to, like sending a thank you message or calling an old friend. Include everything that is worrying you or on your mind. Finally, jot down the things that you've got to do or places you wanted to go. Give yourself some time to be alone with these thoughts, then close the notebook and tell yourself, I'm done with my day. Whatever isn't done can wait until tomorrow. Say it and believe it. Then spend some time doing something relaxing, such as reading for pleasure or taking an Epsom salt bath. If your mind starts to race again, remind yourself that the important stuff is already written down, the day is over, and you are prepared for tomorrow. In the morning when you wake up, take a moment to reread what you wrote the previous night. You'll find that the problems you were so worried about often seem lighter in the bright light of the new day. Everything comes down to the quality of your sleep. Your immunity is increased by 50% when you sleep well. It's actually a community service to everyone you meet. I know how much nicer I am to everyone in my life when I've slept for 7 hours or more. You lose weight, your vaccine response is even increased. Regular physical exercise, even for as little as 10 minutes a day, helps people fall asleep faster, increases total sleep time, and improves overall sleep quality. Physical activity increases the secretion of human growth hormone, which promotes restorative, deeper sleep. Overall fitness helps keep your weight down and improves your mood, which also leads to healthier sleep. Here are some sleep recommendations. 1. Take 2 slow-release magnesium tablets before you go to bed. Magnesium relaxes your muscles, which helps you switch off and go to sleep. Rather use magnesium tablets than the fizzies, as the tablets are slow release and you want the magnesium to gradually be released into your body during the night. 2. Take a bath infused with a cup of Epsom salts an hour before you go to bed. Epsom salts contain magnesium sulfate, which helps relax your muscles. The combination of Epsom salts externally and magnesium tablets internally really helps with a good night's sleep. 3. Get blackout curtains and keep your room as dark and cool as possible. 4. Melatonin is a hormone your brain makes to control your sleep cycle. The process is tied to the amount of light around you. Your melatonin level usually starts to rise after the sun sets and stays high during the night. It drops in the early morning, which helps you wake up. The blue light from a phone or laptop screen interferes with your melatonin production, as your body is getting conflicting signals, and it doesn't know whether to wake up or go to sleep. Don't have a TV in your bedroom and switch off all devices at least half an hour before you go to bed. If you can't get your mind to stop racing, practice the 4-7-8 breathing technique. More about that later. Of breathing in through your nose to the count of 4, holding your breath to the count of 7, and exhaling through your mouth to the count of 8. I've never managed to get beyond 10 cycles of 4-7-8 before I've fallen fast asleep. 5. Invest in your pillow and your bed. You need a new bed every 5 to 7 years. When last did you invest in your bed? It's not a luxury, it's an absolute necessity. I bought myself a new bed for my 50th birthday and find we sleep better than ever. We spend more money on our hair, clothes, holidays, and cars than we do on our beds. But our bed is the place we go to recover every day. Invest in it. Buy the best pillow, bedding, mattress, and blackout curtains you can afford. Part 2. Why Mindfulness? Chapter 6. The Benefits of Mindfulness. What is it to be mindful and how is it going to benefit you? There are many definitions of mindfulness. The one I like best is that it is when we intentionally bring our brain's attention and our body's presence into the same place at the same time. Very often we are physically present somewhere, but our minds are somewhere else entirely. That ability to decide consciously that you are now going to pay full attention and be present is, to my mind, mindfulness in action. It is so interesting how little time we spend in the present moment. We spend half our time feeling guilt or regret about the past, and the other half worrying about the future. The cliche that the reason why the present moment is called the present is because it's a gift is absolutely true. When we are not present in the present moment, we are missing out on our lives, like I missed the tooth fairy. What is your cost of not being present? I remember reading in the news in 2006 of a professor at the University of Cape Town who had to drop off his toddler at relatives on his way to work. He was busy thinking about his day, and the little boy had fallen fast asleep in his car seat. The father parked his car at the lecturer's car park at the university and went about his day. The alarm was raised 3 hours later, and the father rushed to the car to find the little boy dead in his car seat due to intense heat inside the car. This father paid the ultimate price for mindlessness. When the media interviewed some of his students, they said that he was a busy guy, he was always rushing, and he was very forgetful. I believe that life is like a car dashboard, where red flashing lights indicate problems. Just as our car indicates when we are running out of petrol or need an oil change, our life dashboard sends us messages too. These messages are mainly sent through our health and our body. Our body sends us signals all the time. I remember giving a mindfulness presentation to a group of cardiologists a couple of years ago. They told me that nobody has a heart attack out of the blue. Every single person who suffers a heart attack would have had a symptom at least a year before the attack. The most common symptom is reflux, they said. So if you or someone you know is constantly taking antacid medication, then go get them or you checked out. Reflux is a red warning light on your life's health dashboard. I've realized through this work that we don't lose our health, our marriages, relationships, or team members overnight. There is a gradual process of decay and degeneration. If we mindfully pay attention when life whispers to us through our health or our emotional state, then we don't have to wait for the shout that results in a health crisis, divorce, relationship breakdown, or resignation of a team member. I'd like you to consider if there are any potential red flashing lights on your dashboard that you need to pay attention to. One of the most recent warning lights I've encountered is constant phone use. If your constant engagement with technology is affecting your relationship with your team or your family, and people are complaining about it, sit up and take notice. A mindfulness poem. When you shower, shower. When you greet a friend, greet that friend. When you peel a potato, peel a potato. When you have to do admin, do the admin. When you are tired, feel tired. When you take a bite, take a bite. When you laugh, laugh. When you say hello to your child, say hello to your child. When you rest, rest. When you feel under pressure, feel the pressure. When you exercise, exercise. When you attend a meeting, attend the meeting. Mark Twain admitted at the end of his life, "I've spent most of my life worrying about things that never happened." We all do this. Worrying about the future robs you of the present moment. Mindfulness helps us to stay present in the present moment. Chapter 7. How to practically do mindfulness in our busy lives. If I told you that I had the magical elixir that could dramatically change your life in 10 minutes per day, what would you say? 10 minutes of meditation every day will improve your life exponentially. These are some of the benefits. You will learn how to calm your mind on demand. Your concentration and creativity will improve. You will perceive your mental and emotional processes with increasing clarity. And you will discover that self-confidence is something that can arise naturally in a trained mind. I attended a Transcendental Meditation (TM) course just after I graduated from university. I was going through a bad breakup and was feeling heartbroken. Practicing 15 minutes of meditation every day gave me the strength to put one foot in front of the other. I was also amazed at how calm and clear I felt. The best analogy I've heard about meditation is that it clears your windscreen and gives you clarity about your life. Before I started regular meditation practice, I felt that life happened to me and that I was largely a victim of circumstance, just like a windscreen blurred by rain and leaves. 15 minutes of meditation every day gave me visibility and focus about what was important and what I needed to let go of. For me, it was a truly remarkable personal case study of the benefits of stilling your mind. I attended the Google Search Inside Yourself meditation program at a conference in San Francisco a few years ago. I had not seen a better explanation and practical application of meditation before or since. The program was designed by an engineer, and it shows. It has the compelling features of being scientifically grounded, highly practical, and expressed in a very user-friendly way. This is the methodology that we've adopted as a business, and I'm going to share the methodology with you, coupled with our own tools and tricks we've added along the way. There are 3 steps to a mindfulness practice. 1. Attention training. 2. Self-knowledge and self-mastery. And 3. Creating useful mental habits. Let's unpack them. Attention training. The idea is to train attention to create a quality of mind that is calm and clear at the same time. That quality of mind forms the foundation of emotional intelligence. Self-knowledge and self-mastery. Use your trained attention to create greater insights into what makes you tick. This enables you to take on more of an observer role with your thoughts, which gives you greater clarity. One of the most powerful things I learned at a mindfulness retreat at the Temenos Retreat Center in McGregor was that your thoughts are not facts. I found this concept completely mind-blowing. Our thoughts are only our perception of facts. We need to interrogate our thoughts, as they may only be our perception and are often lazy thoughts. It's a concept I've loved since I originally read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which outlined the results of experiments on how the brains react when asked to process new information. Our brains have evolved to the amazing level where they can spot patterns very efficiently and therefore go into autopilot when they see something they're familiar with. Kahneman calls this System 1 thinking, where the brain responds to a familiar event automatically and very quickly. In almost all cases, you won't even be aware of how you came to a solution, and it will just appear because it was so easy. Our brain likes System 1 thinking, as it's more energy efficient than having to take time and resources to process what it perceives as the same challenge each time. System 2 thinking is much slower and more considered. This is the type of thinking that results in complex problem solving, innovation, and strategic thinking. It's not automatic. Your brain needs to put in the effort and energy, which is why it prefers System 1 thinking. Meditation slows down System 1 thinking and enhances System 2 thinking, which enables us to make better, wiser decisions. Create useful mental habits. Imagine that whenever you meet anyone, your first instinctive response is, "I wish only the best for this person." Cultivating habits like these changes everything, both personally and professionally. This sincere goodwill is picked up unconsciously by others, and you create the type of trust that leads to highly productive collaborations. The aim of developing emotional intelligence is to help you optimize yourself and function at an even higher level than you're already capable of. Even if you are already outstanding at what you do, sharpening and deepening your emotional competencies can give you an edge. Create useful mental habits. Imagine that when you meet anyone, your first instinctive response is, "I wish only the best for this person." Cultivating habits like these changes everything, both personally and professionally. This sincere goodwill is picked up unconsciously by others, and you create the type of trust that leads to highly productive collaborations. The aim of developing emotional intelligence is to help you optimize yourself and function at an even higher level than you're already capable of. Even if you're already outstanding at what you do, sharpening and deepening your emotional competencies will give you an edge. Part 1. Train attention. The first way that we can begin training emotional intelligence is by training attention. Strong, stable, and perceptive attention that gives you calmness and clarity is the foundation upon which EQ is built. Viktor Frankl famously said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose that response. And in our response lies our growth and our happiness." The way to train this quality of attention and response is through mindfulness meditation. There is compelling scientific research showing that improving our ability to regulate our attention can significantly impact how we respond to emotions. An interesting study by neuroimaging researcher Julie Dretsinski-Lewis and colleagues revealed that when meditators, those with 10,000 or more hours of meditation training, were subjected to negative sounds, such as a woman screaming, they showed lesser activation in the emotional part of the brain, called the amygdala, compared to beginner meditators. This is especially interesting, as the amygdala is our brain's watchdog, constantly scanning everything we see for threats to our survival. When your amygdala detects what looks like a threat to your survival, such as an aggressive lion charging at you or your boss offending you, it puts you into fight, flight, freeze mode and impairs your rational thinking. It is fascinating that by simply using attention training, you can become good at regulating a part of the brain as primitive and important as the amygdala. How to practice meditation. There is nothing mysterious about meditation. It is just mental training. In early Buddhist texts, the word for meditation is bhavana, which means to cultivate, as in planting crops. Even in ancient societies with long meditation traditions, meditation was not seen as something magical or mysterious. It was just mental training. Mindfulness trains two important faculties, attention and meta-attention. Attention is something we all understand. Meta-attention is the ability to pay attention to attention itself. Put simply, meta-attention is the ability to know that your attention has wandered away. Meta-attention is also the secret to concentration. A good analogy for attention and meta-attention is riding a bicycle. The way you keep a bicycle balanced is with lots of micro recoveries. When the bike tilts to the right, you adjust it slightly to the left. And when it tilts to the left, you adjust it slightly in the opposite direction. By performing micro recoveries quickly and often, you create the effect of continuous upright balance. It's the same with attention. When your meta-attention becomes strong, you'll be able to recover a wandering attention quickly and more often. And if you recover attention quickly and often enough, you create the effect of continuous attention, which is concentration. Relaxed and alert at the same time. The big secret of meditation, especially at the beginning, is that it gets you to a state where your mind is relaxed and alert at the same time. When your attention and meta-attention both become strong, something interesting happens. Your mind becomes increasingly focused and stable, but in a way that is relaxing. It's like balancing on a bicycle on an easy surface. With enough practice, it becomes almost effortless, and you get the experience of moving forward and being relaxed at the same time. You get where you need to be, and you actually enjoy the experience of getting there because it's relaxing. When your mind becomes highly relaxed and alert at the same time, 3 wonderful qualities of mind naturally emerge: calmness, clarity, and happiness. There's a famous mindfulness analogy where you have a pot of water full of gravel, and imagine that pot is constantly shaken and agitated. The water appears cloudy. Imagine that you stop shaking the pot and just let it rest on the floor. The water will become calm, and after a while, all the gravel will settle and the water will appear clear. This is the classic analogy of your mind in the alert and relaxed state. In this state, we temporarily stop agitating the mind, the same way we stop shaking the pot. Eventually, our mind becomes calm and clear. Happiness is the default state of the mind, and when the mind becomes calm and clear, it returns to its default. This implies that happiness is not something you pursue, it's something you allow. Happiness is just being. That insight has the potential to be life-changing. Meditation is like exercise. Meditation is exercise for the mind. When you go to gym, you're training your body so that it can gain more physical abilities. If you lift weights, you will eventually become stronger. If you jog regularly, your times will become faster and you'll be able to run further. In the same way, meditation is training your mind so that it can gain better mental performance. Because if you practice meditation often, your mind becomes calmer and more perceptive, and you can focus your attention more strongly and for longer. Meditation is like exercising at the gym, minus the sweating and the gym. One important similarity between exercise and meditation is that in both cases, growth comes from overcoming resistance. Similar to when you are weight training, and every time you flex your biceps in resistance to the weight of your dumbbells, your muscle grows a little stronger. The same process happens during meditation. Every time your attention wanders away from the breath and you bring it back, it's like flexing your biceps. Your muscle of attention grows a bit stronger. The implication of this insight then is that there is no such thing as a bad meditation. For many of us, when we meditate, we find our attention wanders away from our breath a lot, and we keep having to bring it back. We then think we're doing it all wrong. In fact, this is a good exercise, because every time we bring our wandering attention back, we are giving our muscles of attention an opportunity for growth. A second similarity between exercise and meditation is that they can both significantly change the quality of our life. If you never exercise and you put yourself on a regular exercise regime, a few weeks or months later, you may find significant changes. You'll have more energy, you can get more stuff done, you get sick less often, you look better in the mirror, and you just feel great about yourself. The same is true for meditation. After a few weeks or months of regular meditation, you will have more energy, your mind becomes calmer, clearer, and more joyful, you get sick less often, you smile more, your social life improves because you smile more clearly, and you feel great about yourself. Imagine if you exercised and meditated regularly, you could change the world. Practice of mindfulness meditation. The process starts with an intention, a reason for wanting to be more mindful. It could be to reduce stress, increase your own well-being, or it could stretch to wanting world peace. After creating the intention, the next thing to do is to follow your breath. Just bring gentle attention to the process of breathing. That is all. The classic analogy of this process is a Buckingham Palace guard standing at the gates, watching people go about their business on the street. He doesn't do anything but watch people, but with great vigilance. In the same way, you can think of your mind as a Buckingham Palace guard, vigilantly watching your breath go in and out. At this point, your attention may focus. You may find yourself in a state where your mind is calm and concentrated. With enough practice, this state can last a long time, but for most people, this may go on for a few seconds, and then we become distracted. In this state of distraction, we may start overanalyzing, worrying, or fantasizing. One of my biggest issues is that I start a to-do list in my mind. That's when I just go back to concentrating on my breathing. After a while, we realize our attention has wandered away. The default reaction of most people at this point is self-criticism. We start telling ourselves stories about how bad we are at meditation. Happily, there is a skillful way to deal with this. We need to regain our focus by bringing our attention back to the process of breathing. The second thing is to remember the gym analogy. This process of bringing wandering attention back is like flexing your biceps during your gym workout. This is not failure, it's the process of growth and developing powerful mental muscles. The third thing is to become aware of your attitude towards yourself. See how you treat yourself and how often you engage in self-destructive negative self-talk. Or you can adopt the Zen philosophy of the grandmother mind by adopting the mind of a loving grandmother. I have found this particularly useful as I had two amazing grandmothers who I adored and spent a lot of time with them when I was growing up. I found it very useful when I'm beating myself up about my wandering mind. To a loving grandmother, you are beautiful and perfect in every way, no matter how naughty you are. In her mind, you are perfect and she loves you just the way you are. It doesn't mean that your granny is blind to your faults, nor does it mean she allows you to hurt yourself. Sometimes she even intervenes sternly to stop you from getting yourself into big trouble. But no matter what, you're perfect to her and she loves you. The practice is to see yourself in the eyes of a loving grandmother. The how of a mindfulness meditation practice. Sit comfortably. Sit in a position that enables you to be both relaxed and alert at the same time. Take 3 slow, deep breaths to inject both energy and relaxation into your practice. Breathe naturally and bring a very gentle attention to your breath. You can either bring attention to the nostrils, the abdomen, or the entire body. Become aware of your in-breath, your out-breath, and the space in between. If you like, you can think of this exercise as resting the mind on the breath. You can visualize the breath to be a resting place, or a cushion, or a mattress, and let the mind rest on it very gently. Just be. If at any time you feel distracted by a sensation, thought, or sound, just acknowledge it, experience it, and very gently let it go. Bring your attention very gently back to the breathing. Let us end this meditation by inviting joyful inner peace to arise. Breathing in, I'm calm. Breathing out, I smile. This present moment. Wonderful. Thank you for your attention. The science behind meditation. One of the most telling research studies on meditation was conducted by 2 pioneers in the field of neuroscience, Richard Davidson and John Kabat-Zinn. The study was eye-opening for many reasons. It was the first major study conducted in a business setting with employees of a biotech company as subjects. The study showed that after just 2 weeks of regular meditation, the anxiety levels of the subjects were measurably lower than the non-meditators. More surprisingly, when the electrical activity of the subjects' brains were measured, those in the meditation group showed significantly increased activity in the parts of the brain associated with positive emotions. The most fascinating finding, though, had to do with their immune function. Near the end of the study, subjects were given flu shots, and those in the meditation group developed more antibodies to the flu than the non-meditators. This is especially relevant in COVID times. After 8 weeks of meditation, subjects were significantly happier, as measured in their brains, and showed a marked increase in developing immunity. How do you keep it going? Mindfulness is like exercise. It's not sufficient to just understand the topic. You can only benefit from it with practice. I find it fairly easy to get our delegates excited to start a mindfulness practice, especially when you show the compelling neuroscience and the all-round benefits. They're ready to go. That's the good news. The bad news is that after the first few days, many people find it hard to sustain the practice. Many of them start with great enthusiasm, committing themselves to 10 or 20 minutes a day. After a few days, it starts to feel like a chore, and you sit there bored and restless, wondering why time goes by so slowly. Then after a while, you decide you have more important or interesting things to do, and before you know it, you've lost your daily meditation practice. How can we sustain a mindfulness practice? Happily, the difficulty of sustaining a mindfulness practice often lasts only a few months. It's like starting an exercise regime. The first few months are usually really hard, and you have to discipline yourself into exercising regularly. After a few months, you find your quality of life changing dramatically. You have more energy, you get more stuff done, and you look better in the mirror. You feel great about yourself. Once you reach that point, you just can't not do it anymore. The upgrade in quality of life is just too compelling from that point on. Your exercise regime becomes self-sustaining. Here are 2 suggestions to make your mindfulness practice stick. Have a buddy and commit to checking in with each other once a week. Do less than you are able to. For example, if you can't sit in mindfulness for 5 minutes every day before it feels like a chore, just do 3 or 4 minutes. Chapter 8, Gratitude. If you're stuck in a rut or feeling overwhelmed by life's daily challenges, or feel like your day resembles the movie Groundhog Day, where hours blur into days and weeks blur into months, gratitude and mindfulness can help to transport you into a much more joyful world. Gratitude allows you to notice your blessings and create perspective about life's challenges. Mindfulness helps you handle tough times with grace, acceptance, and surrender. Together, these practices allow us to function at an elevated level compared to people who don't practice gratitude and mindfulness. The common description I hear from friends and colleagues who have no mindfulness practice is that they feel stuck and are going through the motions like a hamster on a treadmill. 1. The benefits of practicing gratitude. A few years ago, American author A.J. Jacobs decided to thank everyone who was involved in making his morning cup of coffee. It became a task of thanking thousands of people across all walks of life from all over the world over a series of months. He discovered that his simple morning cup of coffee would not have been possible without the contribution of thousands of people. He started with the barista and the owner of his favorite coffee shop, and the truck driver who delivered the beans. The delivery company couldn't do their job if there were no roads, including those who built them and tarred them. People he took for granted when he picked up his cup of coffee every morning. In his journey of thanking thousands of people, he also went on a journey of gratitude. The most interesting thing about gratitude is that it's more than just appreciation. It takes you one step further than just appreciating the goodness in your life. Gratitude is acknowledging that the source of this goodness is not only down to our hard work or dedication, but also down to other people's contribution. In thanking all the people who had contributed to his cup of coffee, AJ found that a combined effort from an enormous amount of people was required just to make one delicious cup of coffee. After he completed his gratitude journal, he realized the astounding interconnectedness of our world. While his journey also affected his self-admitted negative thinking tendency, he said that his gratitude project allowed him to focus on the hundreds of things that go right every day, as opposed to the 3 or 4 that go wrong. The impact of gratitude on our mental well-being. The impact of gratitude has long been studied and researched by modern psychologists. The positive mental shifts that AJ talks about experiencing are what psychology professors Dr. Joshua Brown and Dr. Joel Wong uncovered in their study of the effect of gratitude on adults suffering with mental health issues such as depression or anxiety. Their pool of 300 adults was randomly split into 3 groups, which all received counseling. The first group were asked to write a weekly letter of gratitude to someone who had positively contributed to their lives. The letters didn't have to be shared with the people that they were addressed to. The second group were asked to write their thoughts and feelings about negative experiences they had each week. And the third group were given no additional tasks. The results showed that those who wrote letters of gratitude reported a significantly higher level of mental health after the study. When Brown and Wong compared participants from the three groups, they came to an interesting conclusion. It wasn't that the participants who wrote the gratitude letters used more positive emotion and vocabulary, but rather it was the absence of negative words in their vocabulary. The gratitude letter had filtered into all areas of their life: the way they thought, the way they spoke, and the way they interacted with others. The participants were shifting away from toxic emotions that came from negative thinking. Brown and Wong particularly mentioned envy and resentment associated with comparing ourselves to others, creating space and time to focus on the goodness in their lives. The neuroscience of gratitude. Using MRI scanning, many doctors have demonstrated that when people experience gratitude, there is increased brain activity in the same regions that are associated with empathy, moral and social cognition, value judgment, social reward, and interpersonal bonding in the prefrontal cortex. This means that gratitude has the power to rewire our brains by evoking positive thinking. Studies have also shown that gratitude enhances the neurotransmitters that make us happy, dopamine and serotonin. The link between gratitude and mindfulness. Gratitude can't take away the sting of life's challenges, like job loss, heartbreak, divorce, or the death of a loved one. Painful emotions must be felt. As they say, you must feel it to heal it. You can't cover up pain through gratitude. I'm not advocating a Pollyanna approach to life, where you breeze through life with an unrealistic, positive approach to everything. There are many times I've written, "I'm grateful that this day is over," in my gratitude journal. When you combine gratitude and mindfulness, it allows you to acknowledge the blessings in your everyday life and sit with a painful moment at the same time. For example, if you are getting divorced, it can help you be non-judgmental about the pain you feel. Find positive takeaways from the experience. Stop yourself from going around in circles in your head, and protect yourself from getting overwhelmed about what's to come. If we don't acknowledge our blessings when times are challenging, we can easily spiral downwards. Remember, our brain is designed to think negatively. So when your circumstances are trying and your brain is constantly scanning for what else can go wrong, it's no wonder that anxiety and depression levels rise. Gratitude and mindfulness are both practices where you need to consciously do the work. They are not academic practices. They require effort and intentionality every day. Here are some examples of gratitude practices I've found useful. A gratitude journal. Savor small daily experiences and write them down in a journal before you go to sleep. Here is an example from my gratitude journal last night. I'm grateful for my, Sabrina, Caitlin, Michael, Mom, Dad, Mark, Diane, Andrew, and Kim's health. This is my whole family, and I list them every day. Michael's love. I have a wonderful husband, and I'm a big fan of second marriages. I also write this down every day. Running, feeling easier. My team. The work we do and how many people we impact. Great meeting with client, we're aligned. Cappuccinos. Eating well and feeling on track. Our beautiful home with running water and electricity. Coaching session with Caitlin and how impactful Sheridan has been in our lives. Spring is springing. Freedom of choice. Financial serenity. And our bed. Savoring is the art of stepping outside an experience to review and appreciate it. In the end, the quality of our life is largely determined by how much we savor the small things. It's not the big things such as a holiday, a promotion, or a new car that determine long-term happiness. Research very clearly indicates that immediately after we've experienced a very happy, positive event, our brain returns to its baseline level of happiness prior to the positive event. In your BC, before COVID, normal, busy daily life, you may have often failed to stay in the moment and really enjoy what you're experiencing. Many of us were always in a rush for everything. COVID presented us all with the opportunity to stop and savor the small moments in our lives. Shifting our attention towards the small everyday pleasures in our lives can offset the consequences of stress or negative events. For the next 7 days, try the art of savoring. Pick one positive experience each day and truly savor it. It could be your bath or shower, where you really feel the hot water on your body, or really taste your food, and slow down the pace of your eating. During hard lockdown, I made sure I went outside every lunchtime to eat and enjoy the sun on my face. I didn't take my phone or any device. I savored the taste of my food and the sun on my face. It was a highlight of every day, and I've kept up the ritual after lockdown. US researchers reported in 2020 during COVID that experiencing and savoring positive emotions, such as enjoying the small pleasures of life at home, served as a very powerful buffer preventing chronic stress and depression. They noticed that frontline hospital workers who faced severe, sustained high levels of stress were likely to experience less severe depression when they noticed and reported on the small positive joys and positive experiences during their day, such as the beautiful sky, the smile of a patient, the kindness of a colleague, or their first sip of a cup of coffee. Pleasurable experiences might even be of the most benefit in times of stress. If we're too busy doomsday scrolling through Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, we fail to notice the beauty of the sun streaming in through the window, or our child's happy face. It's a missed opportunity for a moment of delight. Desiree Kozlowski from Southern Cross University asked people on Twitter to share what brings them delight in challenging times. Gardens, dogs, children, and nature all featured strongly, and many people reflected on the added pleasure of recalling these moments. These are great examples of how savoring can change your emotional state. Recollection and anticipation, along with relishing pleasure in the moment, are effective ways to maximize the value of positive experiences. We can get better at savoring with practice. The more we savor, the better we feel. Plan your opportunities for pleasure. Diarize them, set your alarm for them, commit to share with others. Photograph them, post them on social media, or share them with family and friends. Anticipate them gleefully and reflect on them with delight. This is our time to be here. Savor. Practical ways to be more mindful in your daily life. How to do a gratitude meditation. 5-minute gratitude meditation on a person, place, or meal. I especially like doing this when someone is annoying me, as it shifts my negative energy about that person. Take a seat, relax your face, draw your shoulders down away from your ears, loosen your jaw, relax your gaze, and close your eyes. Take 5 to 10 deep breaths. Think of a person that you're grateful for and picture them in your mind. Let gratitude fill your heart and say thank you for that person. Notice their facial expression. Observe what they're wearing and watch their mannerisms. Think of all their positive qualities and feel deep gratitude for the impact they've had in your life. Think of a place that you loved visiting. For me, it's always the bush and the silence there. Listen to the sounds in your head. Imagine how it would smell and feel the weather on your skin. Think of a favorite meal and see it clearly in your mind. Mine is a pasta dish we had on the Italian island of Capri for my very good friend's 40th birthday. It was the most delicious meal I've ever tasted. I can still taste the basil, the al dente pasta, and the perfect flavors melting in my mouth. Avoid multitasking, the joy of deep work. One of the most profound books I've ever read, and that has had the most practical impact on my life, is Deep Work by Cal Newport. He defines deep work as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive abilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skills, and are hard to replicate. I'm writing this book in a state of deep work. My phone is on airplane mode, and my email notifications are switched off. I'm doing this one task deeply. Many thought leaders and influencers across the world use deep work regularly. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling was famously absent from social media during the writing of her Harry Potter novels, even though this period coincided with the rise of technology and its popularity. Rowling's staff finally started a Twitter account in her name after she finished the Harry Potter series. For the first year and a half, her only tweet read, "This is the real me, but you won't be hearing from me often, I'm afraid, as pen and paper are my priority at the moment." Microsoft founder Bill Gates took Think Weeks twice a year where he'd isolate himself, often in a lakeside cottage, to do nothing but read and think. The reason people like us, knowledge workers, are losing our familiarity with deep work is well established. We live in a state of constant interruption by email, SMS, WhatsApp, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and various infotainment sites. The average American spends 5.4 hours a day using their phone. This equates to 76,500 hours or 9 years of their life. This state of fragmented attention cannot accommodate deep work, which requires long periods of uninterrupted thinking. At the same time, modern knowledge workers are not lazing about. They report they are as busy as ever. The problem is we are busy primarily with the opposite of deep work, shallow work. Shallow work is defined as non-cognitively demanding, logistical-style tasks, often performed while distracted. This work doesn't create much new value in the world and is easy to replicate. I think we can all agree that in these challenging times we are facing new problems and a level of complexity and ambiguity we've never seen before. Shallow work is not going to provide the innovative solutions we need. Deep work is the only way we are going to produce meaningful solutions to these challenging problems. Deep work ideally happens in 90-minute stretches, and we can generally achieve 2 or 3 of these periods in a day, after which our concentration maxes out. I manage one period of 90 minutes of deep work most days, and I keep my Thursday mornings free to do 2 periods of deep work. Since implementing these strategies, both our business and my productivity has grown exponentially. It's how I wrote this book during a very busy time. So if deep work sounds so fantastic, why aren't more of us doing it? We are tugged around by our desires all day. Roy Baumeister and co-author John Tierney wrote in their book Willpower that our desire to be distracted turned out to be the norm, not the exception. The 4 most common desires that people experience included eating, sleep, sex, and taking a break from hard work. This is when we're checking email, surfing the web, listening to music, or watching TV. The lure of the internet and TV were especially strong. Subjects only succeeded in resisting the TV and internet half the time. We have a finite amount of willpower that becomes depleted as we use it. This is why most people break diets on a Thursday afternoon when they've started on a Monday. Our willpower runs out. The key to developing a deep work habit is to move beyond good intentions and add routines and rituals to your working life. These rituals are to minimize the limitations of your willpower that will result in the deep focused work of unbroken concentration. How to do deep work. Schedule it like a meeting request. Turn off everything, including email notifications, and mark your deep work off with a cross on a calendar. Jerry Seinfeld, one of my favorite comedians, was asked by an aspiring comedian how to be a better comedian. Seinfeld said, "The way to be a better comic is to create better jokes," and then explained that the way to create better jokes was to write every day. Seinfeld described the technique he used to help maintain his discipline. He keeps a calendar on his wall. Every day that he writes jokes, he crosses out the date on the calendar with a big red X. After a few days, you'll have a chain. Seinfeld said, just keep up with the red crosses and the chain will grow. Your only job then is not to break the chain. The chain method soon became a hit amongst writers and fitness enthusiasts who thrive on the ability to do hard things consistently. My deep work schedule, which I adopted in writing this book, has been accompanied by many rituals. I go for an hour walk at 7 a.m. to clear my brain. I sit in a certain armchair and write from 8:30 to 10 a.m. I have my epiphany coffee as I start, and I have my favorite blanket over my knees. I'm plugging into my rituals to take me into my creative writing state without any distractions. Your rituals must address the following: where you'll work and for how long, how you'll work once you start your work, such as a ban on internet and email access, how you'll support your work. I start with my favorite cup of coffee, or you may want to have access to your favorite snacks so you don't have to get up. Our old way of working in open plan offices doesn't support deep work. Even before COVID, Bloomberg Businessweek called for an end to the tyranny of the open plan office. The idea of the open plan office was to facilitate communication and idea flow. This setup also resulted in this theory of serendipitous creativity, which in our previous way of working was believed to facilitate brainstorming and innovative ideas amongst teams. In the new world of work, we need to create spaces and time for both deep work and the serendipitous collaboration that open plan offices allow for. In the future, there will be two kinds of people in the world: those who let their attention and lives be controlled by others, and those who proudly call themselves indistractable. As author Nir Eyal says in his excellent book, Indistractable, living the life we want does not only require doing the right things, it also requires that we stop doing the wrong things that take us off track. We all know that eating cake is worse for our waistline than eating a healthy salad. We agree that aimlessly scrolling through our social media feed is not as fulfilling as being with real friends in real life. We know that if we want to be more productive at work, we need to stop wasting time and actually do the work. We already know what to do. What we don't know is how to stop getting distracted. Unless we deal with the root causes of our distraction, we'll continue to find ways to distract ourselves. It isn't about the distraction itself, but how we respond to it. Many people don't want to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that distraction is always an unhealthy escape from reality. How we deal with uncomfortable internal triggers determines whether we pursue healthy acts of deep work or self-defeating distractions. Distraction is just another way our brains attempt to deal with pain. If we accept this fact, it makes sense that the only way to handle distraction is by learning to handle discomfort. Where does our distraction come from? Why are we perpetually restless and unsatisfied? We live in the safest, healthiest, most well-educated, most democratic time in human history, and yet we are constantly restless and seeking. A study published in the Review of General Psychology found that if satisfaction and pleasure were permanent, there might be a little incentive to continue to seek further benefits or advances. In other words, feeling content is not good for us. Our ancestors worked harder and strove further in order to survive. So we remain eternally restless and generally discontented. Our tendency towards boredom, negativity bias, overanalyzing, and happiness adaptation conspire to make sure we're never satisfied for too long. Let's unpack them. Boredom. The lengths people go to avoid boredom may shock you, literally. In an article published by the Science magazine, participants were asked to sit in a room and think for 15 minutes. The room was empty except for a device that could administer a mild electric shock. Who on earth would want to do that, you may think? But 67% of the men and 25% of the women gave themselves electric shocks, and many did so multiple times. The only conclusion that the authors could come to is that people prefer doing to thinking, even if what they're doing is so unpleasant that they would normally pay to avoid it. They say that the untutored mind doesn't like to be alone with itself. Negativity bias. This is a phenomenon where negative events are perceived to be more important and demand more attention than neutral or positive events. Babies begin to show signs of negativity bias at just 7 months old, suggesting that this tendency is inborn. Researchers believe we tend to have an easier time recalling bad memories than good ones. Studies have found people are more likely to recall unhappy moments in their childhood, even if they would describe their childhood as generally happy. Negativity bias gave our ancestors an evolutionary edge. Good things are nice, but bad things can kill you. That's why we pay attention. Overanalyzing. Our tendency to keep thinking about bad experiences takes up a lot of our bandwidth. If you've ever had thoughts about something you did, or that somebody did to you over and over again, you are overanalyzing. It can be a useful trait in that you analyze what went wrong, but overdoing it doesn't contribute to your overall happiness. Happiness adaptation. This tendency to return quickly to a baseline level of satisfaction, no matter what happens to us in life, may be the cruelest of them all. As David Myers writes in The Pursuit of Happiness, every desirable experience, a passionate love, a spiritual high, winning the lottery, the pleasure of a new possession, the exhilaration of success, is transitory. Dissatisfaction and discomfort dominate our brain's default state, but we can use them to motivate us instead of defeat us. Dissatisfaction is responsible for our species' advances and its faults. It's good to know that feeling bad isn't actually bad. It's exactly what survival of the fittest intended. From that place of acceptance, we stand a chance of avoiding the pitfalls of our basic nature. We can recognize pain and rise above it, which is the first step on the road to becoming more mindful. How to beat phone interruptions. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Human Perception and Performance found that receiving a cell phone notification but not replying to it was just as distracting as responding to a call or message. By having your phone in your field of view, your brain must work hard to ignore it. But if your phone isn't easily accessible or visually present, your brain is able to focus on the task at hand. So when you are engaging in deep work, make sure your phone is not visible. Airplane mode isn't even enough. Beat email interruptions. There's mounting evidence that processing your email in batches is much more efficient and less stress-inducing than checking it throughout the day. This is because our brains take time to switch between tasks. So it's better to focus on answering emails all at once. I switched off email notifications on my phone, and it's a game changer. My attention is now not being yanked around by every ping on my phone to notify me that there is a new email. Checking email isn't so much the problem. It's the habitual rechecking that gets us into trouble. Does the following sound familiar? An icon tells you that you have an email. So you click and scroll through your inbox and read message after message to see if anything requires a reply. Later in the day, you open your inbox and, forgetting what was in the messages you read earlier, you reopen some messages again. You may open and reopen some messages an embarrassing number of times. What a waste of time. According to Nir Eyad, from his research into distraction, the solution to this mania is simple. Only touch email twice. When opening an email, do one thing before closing it. Answer the question, when does this email require a response? Label emails according to when each message needs a response. Reply to emails during a scheduled time in your calendar twice a day. Do things with both hands. When I was 16, I was going through my first heartbreak. Young love had not run smoothly and I was devastated, as only a 16-year-old could be. I had a very wise grandmother who I adored, and she died shortly after this incident. While I was crying my eyes out, she said to me, whenever you feel heartbroken or sad, you need to get out of your head and use your hands creatively. Cook, bake, garden, do woodwork, paint, clean cupboards, knit, crochet, fix cars, color in. I've never forgotten the advice to use both hands when you're feeling sad, and this wisdom has served me well. When both my husband and I had COVID, and I was obviously very worried about our health and generally felt very uncertain, I started to knit. This proved to be a valuable distraction and calming tool. Why is this true? Firstly, when we use our hands on a task that doesn't demand too much from our brains, it gives the mind a chance to relax and rest. Knowledge workers, who most of us are, constantly use our brains, even more so with the advent of smartphones and technologies. It's as if our brains are on a constant pressure cooker. I love reading. I read business books and articles and books on my laptop and Kindle. I also love reading physical novels, and I listen to podcasts when I exercise and bath. My brain rarely gets a break from all of this stimulation, and that's without all the social media, email, and internet distractions we all experience every day. I've experienced a wonderful sense of relief and pleasure since starting to knit. I'm doing something with my hands that doesn't require me to think much about anything. It's such a break, and it fills me with joy. I also like adult coloring in. Whenever I fly long distances, my ink gel pens and slogan coloring in books go with me. I find it really relaxes me, as traveling on a plane is always stressful. On one memorable trip to Cape Town, I got two very stiff and professional-looking businessmen next to me to join in. I tore out pages for them, shared my pens, and we all colored in for an hour. They told me how amazed they were at how relaxed they felt. Secondly, as Dr. Health and Wellness expert Susan Bailey-House says, when our brain is offline, it gives it a chance to work on problems behind the scenes. It is very common to have those eureka moments we spoke about earlier in the book, while mindlessly working on something with our hands. Thirdly, working productively with our hands is profoundly pleasurable. There is something primal about this. We are made to be active and have used our hands as part of our daily survival for thousands of years. I took great joy in seeing my knitting improve, from a very amateur beanie and scarf for myself to much better ones for my daughters. Through my research, I found that my granny's advice was also handed down by other grandmothers. This conversation, told by Eleanor Burnaby, sums it up so well. Grandma, how do you deal with pain? With your hands, dear. When you do it with your mind, the pain hardens even more. With your hands, Grandma. Yes, yes. Our hands are the antennas of our soul. When you move them by sewing, cooking, painting, woodworking, touching the earth, or sinking them into the earth, they send signals of caring to the deepest part of you, and your soul calms down. This way, she doesn't have to send pain anymore to show it. Are hands really that important? Yes, my girl, think of babies. They get to know the world thanks to their touch. When you look at the hands of older people, they tell more about their lives than any other part of the body. Everything that is made by hand, so it is said, is made with a heart, because it really is like this. Hands and heart are connected. My hands, Grandma, how long since I used them like that? Move them, my love. Start creating with them, and everything in you will move. The pain will not pass away, but it will be the best masterpiece, and it won't hurt as much anymore, because you managed to embroider your essence. Part 3, Putting Everything into Practice. Chapter 9, Why is change so hard? And why willpower doesn't work. We generally start off a new year with goals or New Year's resolutions. We're determined that this year is going to be different. These goals typically fall into 5 areas: weight loss, exercise, finances, stopping smoking, and studying. We decide that we're going to register for our MBA, run a marathon, and lose 20 kilograms. We start off strong and committed, and by the end of February, the novelty has worn off and old patterns have resurfaced. We're busy, and by March, we can barely remember what our New Year's resolutions were. I call this the Eno effect. There's a big fizz of activity, but very shortly afterwards, the fizz has disappeared. The water looks the same. It doesn't taste great, but it looks the same. And we are back to living our year pretty similarly to how we lived the previous year. I'm going to share a couple of techniques that have helped me with sustainable, lasting change. The Baraka change, as I call it, is when you place a vitamin B energy fizzy into water and while the water takes longer to fizz, it fundamentally changes the color of the water. This is the kind of change that lasts and becomes part of your everyday schedule. The first step is acknowledging your old story, the story you've been telling yourself around certain areas of your life that you want to change, but you feel you're in a cul-de-sac. These are the New Year's resolutions we repeat year in and year out, and we just can't seem to make the shift. This was my old story 15 years ago. The story that is dominating my life is that you can't have it all as a successful businesswoman. I can be a good mother and successful in my business, but I'm not able to have a relationship at the same time. My previous relationship experience post my divorce proved too stressful in juggling all these balls. I felt like I was in a permanent state of anxiety and there was always a trade-off. I felt my loyalties and love were divided. As a result, I've decided to postpone having a partnership relationship until my girls are finished school, as I want to be the best mother possible to them. I never want to feel like I've compromised them in any way. So for me, it's either been you are a good mother or you have a successful relationship. What's not working is my weight. I've put on weight, but I keep on postponing doing something until Monday. I've gone up 2 sizes and I feel it's a reflection of an unconscious life. I'm not fully present. My old story kept me in a cul-de-sac of single parenthood and being at least 10 kilograms overweight for over 12 years. I remember going to see Susie Orman, the Get Your Finances Organized author, speaking at a financial roadshow. As she began her presentation, a very animated man put up his hand and explained he'd come with his wife and had to leave early to attend another meeting. He said he didn't have time to hear her whole spiel and asked what was the one thing that she considered most important when improving someone's financial state of affairs. She thought for a minute and said, they face the truth and make a spreadsheet of all their debt, open their bills, and face reality. I realize that doesn't just apply to your finances. Until we acknowledge we have a problem and face the truth about that problem, nothing will change. Any addiction counselor will testify to that fact. I needed to acknowledge my old story and face some hard truths. Your new story always begins with, the truth is. In my new story, the truth is that there could be a man who loves me and loves my children, who is able to be flexible and kind enough to adapt. If I carry on like this, I'll just be more and more stressed, shouldering everything on my own, single parenthood of twins, running 2 businesses, and taking care financially of my parents. I send out the message that I don't need anyone, when in fact I'm deeply vulnerable and would love to share my life with someone. If my weight carries on increasing, it has become symbolic of the heavy burdens I carry. The weight is symbolic of me seeking comfort in food. I need to find comfort in myself and in my loved ones. Writing down these home truths led to a great deal of personal reflection and introspection. I started 2 new rituals to promote a healthier body and mind. I started running, and I started to actively practice gratitude every day. And I met my husband 2 years after acknowledging that he could exist by writing my new story. Acknowledge where you're at. I love the concept of a pre-magnificent stage, written about in Simple Abundance by Sarah Ban Brannock. She describes a pre-magnificent stage as when you feel that everything in your life is wrong. You're not happy with your work, your relationship, how you look, or all of the above. Everything feels scratchy and annoying, and you feel like this stage is permanent. This is exactly when you are pre-magnificent. You are like the moth about to emerge as the butterfly. The biggest problem when we're going through this painful, uncomfortable stage is that we yearn for the familiar. We stay in the average relationship or job. We settle for being 10, 20, 30 kilograms overweight. We settle. Settling for second best is the biggest reason we don't change. The biggest reason we don't change is a worthiness issue. We don't believe we are worthy of having the best relationship, career, or body. We need to recognize that settling keeps us in our pre-magnificence moth stage. We need to trust ourselves during the process, enough to push through awkward transitions, massive discomfort, and change to become the truly magnificent butterfly we deserve and are meant to be. Face our change dragons. In order to move through our pre-magnificent stage, we need to come face to face with our change dragons, which are fear, doubt, impatience, blame, guilt, and shame. Some tips on dealing with the change dragons. During times of change, we often feel weak and incapable. I'm here to remind you that you're much stronger than you've ever imagined. You've already been through many more changes than you realize. In Ariane de Bonvoisin's book, The First 30 Days, she advocates writing any number of the beliefs below on sticky notes and post them in your bathroom. I'm a big believer in crutches. This too shall pass, my favorite. Things always work out in the end. I will get through this. Life is on my side. I will find a way through. I'm not alone, and I can change. The change guarantee is that from this situation, something good will come. When you are going through change, what are the advantages life may be bringing you? What is the good that may come? New possibilities and new choices in a specific area. Realizing how strong you are and you can handle anything that life throws at you. Increased adaptability. Healing physically and emotionally. Moving closer to what you really want out of life. Great lessons and wisdom. Better understanding of who you really are. How strong is your change muscle? My change muscle is strengthened when I stay physically healthy, active, and fit. Eat well. Like any other muscle, the change muscle needs good food and fuel. Maintain optimism and hope and focus on positive things. Become conscious of my belief systems and the language I use. Forgive and am grateful and honest. Believe in myself, in my ability to change, and in life's determination to bring me good things. And grieve any loss or pain associated with the change. Let it out by crying, venting, journaling. My change muscle is weakened when I get overwhelmed by the change dragons of fear, blame, shame, doubt, guilt, and impatience, as well as by anger and any other disempowering emotion that may show up during change. Criticize myself, creating an immediate separation from my inner source of strength. Am closed-minded with an inability to see other options or possibilities, or refuse to trust that something good will come from this change. Comparing myself to other people. Isolate myself from sources of support. I often do this. Succumb to needing to know what's next by pushing for answers and meaning right away, instead of allowing life to unfold at its own pace. Don't trust my intuition. Am a victim, not taking responsibility for my life. Insist on being right rather than listening to what life is telling me. And spending too much energy dwelling on the past or painting negative future scenarios. I have exercised my change muscle many times, as I'm sure you have, but the two standout occasions were the following. When my girls were 3 years old, we lived in Dubai. I was desperately homesick and realized I wasn't suited to an expat life. I wanted my girls to grow up in South Africa surrounded by family. I made the decision to leave my husband at the time and come home. My entire support structure in Dubai was against it, saying things like, "How are you going to cope being a single parent of 3-year-old twins? And why would you go back to South Africa when it is so unsafe?" I knew in my gut it was the right thing to do. I do, however, remember feeling quite terrified as I walked towards the plane in Dubai, holding my little girl's hands as the plane took off, looking down at the lights of Dubai and realizing and acknowledging the enormity of my decision. To this day, it remains one of the best decisions I ever made. My ex-husband's career soared as he wasn't destined for an office and was now free to travel to oil refinery sites all over the world. My girls grew up going to one of the best schools in Johannesburg, and they have a very clear idea of who they are. They've been surrounded by a loving extended family, and I'm home. I love South Africa. its people, and the amazing opportunities for us to make an impact in a developing country. I count my blessings every day around our work. The phenomenal people that live here, the weather, and the fact that we directly impact people every day through our leadership development work. My second instance of exercising my change muscle was deciding to run the New York Marathon in 2011. I'd never run that distance before that, and have never run another marathon since. I thought, if I'm going to kill myself, let me do it in style in New York. I trained throughout winter, I logged the hours, and it still remains one of the best days of my life. 2.5 million people come out to support you, and there were 500 bands along the way. It was the closest I've ever come to feeling like a rock star. The most important change lesson I took out of this exercise was, when things seem overwhelming, break it down into smaller pieces. 42 kilometers is 26.2 miles. So I decided to run 1 mile 26 times. Luckily, there's a refreshment stop at the end of each mile. I would then stop, have a drink, take a photo, revel in the vibe, and carry on my next mile. 42 kilometers is a very overwhelming number, and that valuable lesson of breaking the marathon down has been such a useful life lesson to me after the marathon. As soon as I find a business problem challenging or overwhelming, I break it down into manageable pieces. One of our philosophies of our business, the networking company, is that no one is coming to rescue you. When I told my mom that this is one of the principles we teach delegates, she was horrified and said she can't believe people pay us to hear that no one is coming. I responded saying we believe people spend a lot of time as people in waiting, as we wait for bosses, husbands, wives, or friends to rescue us. When you realize that you are the one you've been waiting for, you move away from a victim mentality to one of being brave, taking risks, and taking personal responsibility. Then you are in a position to acknowledge and overcome your change dragons. Chapter 10. How to deal with your change dragons. Change dragon 1. Fear. Fear is like a heat-seeking missile. You can't run away from it, hide from it, clutch it, but if you walk right at it, it misses you completely. It goes right past you as if you were just an illusion. Richard Makovitz, TV host and former US Navy SEAL. During change, it's normal to experience many different types of fears. Fear of the future and the unknown, fear of not being safe, fear of the reactions of loved ones, fear of no longer knowing who you are once something important in your identity has changed, fear of being alone, fear of not having enough money, fear of not being good enough, fear that your greatest dreams, getting a promotion, getting married, or having a family won't come true. You'll notice that fear is an emotion that exists only with regard to the future. Worry and anxiety come from imagining terrible scenarios that could occur in the future, instead of focusing on what is actually happening in the present moment.